Welcome to a new series that I'm starting called Canon Fodder. And this is going to be me working through the great books of the Western tradition using Britannica's great books. I'm using them just as kind of what's included in the great books. I'm sure there are many great books that aren't included, but you have to choose a list somewhere, and that's the one I'm choosing. So this is going to be a little different from my other videos on this channel because I'm not really approaching this from the perspective of a teacher, rather a learner. I'm just in this to learn as much as I can and bring you along if you care to join. So the content might be a little different from my other stuff, which is fine. Um, I started, I'm starting with something I'm fairly comfortable with. I'm starting with Plato. And I'm not going to go through the complete works of Plato because that would take a long time. So I've chosen one book to start with, and then I'm going to move on to a different author and probably a different time period and just kind of work through like that. And the book I chose was the Protagoras. And I did that for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's pretty short. It's accessible. I really enjoy the book. And it's also one that I think encapsulates a lot of Plato's ideas in a way that's not sort of like his greatest hits. You know, it's not the Apology, it's not the Republic, but it is a very fun book. So I read the book, and I'm basically going to be sharing thoughts, and then I'm also going to be sharing sort of like the wisdom, the learning element of it. What one might walk away from this book knowing better than they did before. So the Protagoras itself is one of Plato's, there's some contention, right? But it's either early or middle or early middle, some say, which just really just means how much of Plato gets inserted into the ideas. The real early dialogues, it's a lot of Socrates and Socrates' original ideas. That's what most people believe. That's what I believe as well. So as we kind of get away from the early, Plato starts to play with his own ideas, and they show up. But we can think that Socrates is his genuine ideas are indeed featured here. And Protagoras is a sophist. This is a dialogue between Socrates and Protagoras. And as a sophist, he is being opposed, at least nominally, by Socrates. And the funny thing about maybe the conception of Plato's dialogues that involve sophists, they're not all bad. The sophists aren't all painted in a negative light. I mean, Protagoras certainly isn't, and neither is Gorgias in the Gorgias. There are a couple others that kind of get a bad rap, probably for a good reason. But in this dialogue, this conversation between Socrates and Protagoras, it's pretty uncontentious, I guess you'd say. You know, some feathers get ruffled a little bit, but that's about it. One thing to note about this is, and any of Plato's dialogues, is that the characters in the dialogue are significant. Why they're included. And in this particular dialogue, the big question is, can virtue be taught? And one of the things that you would assume if virtue could be taught is that virtuous people would have virtuous pupils or virtuous kids, or you know, the people that are kind of under the virtuous people would become virtuous, right? And the characters featured in this sort of tip the hand of what Plato believes, I think, by showing that that's not the case. Besides Socrates and Protagoras, there are three characters, Alcibiades, Critias, and Charmides, that are present that end up being either tyrants, the 30 tyrants after the Peloponnesian War, or in the case of Alcibiades, very closely linked with those tyrants. And so the question is, how could these people who have, great education, who study under these prominent people who say they can teach virtue, even Socrates, Alcibiades is one of Socrates' pupils, how could they go bad? And sort of the implication there is that virtue may not be teachable, or it may not be teachable in the way that, say, math is teachable, or how to play an instrument. And so the main question of the dialogue is, can virtue be taught? And Protagoras, as someone who is a sophist, that is, someone who charges to teach political virtue, says, yes, it can, because I do it. And Socrates disagrees. And from that starting point, it kind of branches out into a couple of different places. Early on, we get the myth of Prometheus and Epimetheus, which is something I'm hoping to actually do a separate video on, because it's a very fun myth. But the idea of that is, there are, when stuff was being created, these two gods were in charge of that process. And Prometheus, for, and Epi, after, Metheus being thought. So we got forethought and afterthought, are in charge of giving all of creation their tools. So like a tiger gets claws and teeth, and a rabbit gets speed and reproductive abilities, and basically everything got some element of protection. And by the time that they got to humans, they kind of reached into their bag and realized, there's nothing left. Right? We don't have claws. We're not that fast. We don't have fur, so like it gets cold. And so they're like, we kind of screwed this one up. So Prometheus goes ahead and steals some stuff from the gods, from Athena and Hephaestus, maybe? It's not coming to mind. But basically he steals things that are from the gods. So, I mean, the big thing is fire. And fire represents a lot of things. Fire represents technical skills. It represents cooking. It represents basically like civilization, is sort of entailed in that. And certain artisanal skills get stolen and given to the newly minted mankind. And in the story, the myth exists in many different locations, but in the story, Prometheus gets punished for this. And ultimately, Zeus comes down and he's like, well, we got all these people that can do stuff, but they're like, politically, they're not really able to stay together. They're not unified. So I'm going to give everybody political acumen, or everyone virtue. So it's not like a builder who needs to study to learn how to build a house. Like, everyone has this general sense of what's right. And because everyone has this general sense of what's right, everyone can participate in political life, whereas only an expert can participate in the skills and crafts that they're in. From there, the question gets asked, is virtue one thing, or is it many things? And this is sort of a tangent that leads into the final conclusion. But when you say, is virtue one thing, the classical virtues, which include justice and temperance and wisdom and courage, the question is, like, are they one thing? So the Protagoras uses the example of a face. There's one face, but say justice might be the eye, temperance might be the nose, wisdom might be the mouth. Like, it's one item, but the items that comprise that items, they are different. They look different. Or is it like a part of a chunk of gold? So like, there are multiple parts of a bar of gold, but they're all gold. Like, if you took that chunk off, it would be the same thing. And so Protagoras is arguing that the virtues are indeed different, like the nose and the mouth, whereas Socrates is wondering if that's so. And this gets into Platonic view of virtue, and it's not mentioned here, but basically like the good, the forms, all of those things that kind of come up in other Platonic works, where Plato is going to argue that that everything kind of partakes of one unified whole. Whereas, that's not a view that's common. That's why Protagoras doesn't share it. And I'm not going to get into the details of that particular argument, just to say that after a whole bunch of wrangling about the virtues and then about courage in particular, they come to the conclusion that virtue is a type of knowledge. And so why that's significant is that if it is indeed a type of knowledge, then it can be taught. So the roles kind of get reversed. Socrates, who argued that it can't, right, that it can't be taught, is now saying, I wonder if it can, because we just determined that it's knowledge. And Protagoras, who thought that it can be taught, still comes out at the end fairly flustered and is sort of unwilling to continue. As far as Protagoras goes, I mean, I alluded to this earlier. He comes out looking pretty good. We tend to like. There's no reason to dislike him. In other dialogues, I'm thinking of Callicles in the Gorgias. You really don't like the person. And there are others. I mean, in the end of the Gorgias, more or less, Socrates puts Callicles in hell. So like, we don't really get that. It's very friendly and it's very cordial. So having gone through sort of the plot, I wanna sort of apply some of this and see what we can come up with as far as takeaways. The first thing that personally, right, because I've read lots of Plato, and so returning to it, one of the things that really struck me is that Socrates isn't always the good guy. His questions aren't always honest. He's kind of sophistical himself, and particularly in this dialogue, I actually don't think he's even right, or the more right one out of the two interlocutors. And I think that's just something for me as I parse through some of the other dialogues in the future, just to keep an eye on. That Plato as a playwright, as someone who's writing what is basically fiction, his ideas may not always be in the mouth of the main character, and that's something to consider even for writing. I write fiction, and your protagonist, your good guy, may not always be saying what you believe, that's for sure, but may not always be saying the right thing either, And I'm not even saying like, oh, people make mistakes. I'm saying as an author, you have kind of you have an objective to say something using every element of your story. So all the characters have to contribute to that in some way. Some of them are what you shouldn't be doing. Some of them are, giving an example of a failed idea, or however it works out. Like, you really need to use everybody to get the idea across, whatever that idea may be. So, I mean, again, that's sort of personal as someone who's interested in the craft of writing. But it's also something to think about just as you approach any, certainly a dialogue, but any writing. The next question, and the one that I think Plato wants us to be asking, is virtue indeed teachable? And the answer is, well, the answer is I don't know. But I don't think it's teachable in the way that like music is teachable, or in the way that math is teachable. Like I don't think it's like this is the correct thing to do it. And wisdom as a virtue is kind of an example of that. Wisdom is sort of like the application of knowledge, figuring out how to use something in the right way. But even at a deeper level than that, I think virtue is something that you have to see as good. You have to sort of make a decision, whether that's a conscious decision or an unconscious decision, to apply it, to say, I want to pursue virtue. Because there are a lot of other avenues you can take. You could take the avenue of, I want to look good. I want people to think I'm good. I want success. I'm sure there are plenty of people who are actionably very good that are doing it for ends that are not, you know, that are not goodness itself, right? Politicians or pastors, or certain jobs where you have to at least appear good. But I think the teachable element is teaching that virtue, that right action and conduct, is for the best, not your best. Yes, your best, the people around you, their best, society's best. And even when the particulars, when, telling the truth gets you in trouble, or when courage gets you hurt, even when those particulars aren't necessarily for your best, you still have this sense that virtue is for the best, broadly. And I think once you come to that conclusion, then you can start learning the particulars. Then if someone's teaching you, hey, this is the virtuous action, or virtue is this, then you can start applying those things in a way that may be considered teaching virtue. I think, this is all, if this were all settled, then there would be no reason to be reading these books anyway. So I think that's what I have from this book. It's good. It's a quick read, and it's public domain. So it's all things that if you were interested, you could pick this up. You could read it in a few hours. I think the audiobook I listened to was 3 hours, but it included a pretty long preamble from the translator, which was actually very helpful in kind of getting me reacclimated to the book itself. So that's it. This is episode 1. Episode 2 is going to include a different book from a different author, and I haven't decided which one that is yet. But stay tuned, and I will see you next time.